much. It's can everyone hear me okay? If you can you raise your hand in the back if you can hear me just fine? Okay, good. You know, if you're having trouble hearing me at any point, please do a little bit of waving and I can try to adjust the microphone. So thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. For many years, I have heard about this conference from my colleagues at Project Zero, and I'm thrilled to be here this time around to share some of my work. So thank you. And if you're sitting apart, sort of on your own in the middle of the section, if you could move toward another person, because we are going to have a moment in which I'm going to ask you to turn to someone nearby you and have a little bit of a chat about something related to our topic today. So if you're sitting in the middle of a row and there's no one nearby, if you could move toward another person, that would be wonderful. Oh, they don't hear me. Okay. Making adjustments for the volume. That's fine. Okay, is that better? I feel like Madonna or an aerobics instructor. Okay, so further adjustments are underway. So before I launch into the core content of my talk today, I want to say a few words about the hats I wear, not to mention the headgear, and the perspectives I bring to my work on digital media and young people's digital lives. First, I'm a researcher at Project Zero. For 12 years, I've been working with Howard Gardner and colleagues on an initiative called the Good Project, where we've been studying social responsibility and ethics. So that's how I come to being interested in some of the issues around digital ethics. More recently, I've been working with Shari Tishman and Dave Perkins on different projects at PZ, and their foundational work on thinking dispositions has really informed my work and my thinking, and you'll see that revealed in my talk today. I'm also a sociologist by training, so I'm always interested in how social contexts and social structures are really informing the beliefs we have, the lives we choose to lead, and our thinking. So the work I'm going to talk with you about today sits at the intersection of those three things: ethics, thinking, and social context. And today the focus is really on digital context. An important note, because we're, where the conference is located, so the context of my research has been the United States. So the examples I'm going to draw on today and the young people whose thinking I'm going to analyze with you, they are Americans. These are U.S. examples. And I'm really mindful that the U.S. is a distinct cultural context, and I'll be really interested in further conversations with many of you at the conference to hear how some of the things I've observed in my research compare with your own observations about young people in Spain and in other parts of the world that you're from. On a final, so there's the work on Disconnected, where my location in the United States. And then on a final biographical note, I'm also a parent of young children, 2 girls, ages 5 and 9. So when I think about the digital realm, I'm really thoughtful about how my own daughters are thinking about and handling that problem space, especially when they're immersed in really compelling digital spaces like Minecraft, for instance. My 9-year-old is quite obsessed with that online game. So a quick overview of what I'd like to address in this session. I'd like to bring us into the problem space that I talk about in Disconnected by sharing a few powerful and revealing stories. Then I'll provide a little bit of framing for why I think it's important to look at ethical issues on the internet and among young people in particular. Then we'll dig into some of the key insights from the book focused on the broad theme of online participation. I'll talk a bit about the mindsets of young people that I noticed when we did this research. This will lead us into different ways of thinking about the web, including some thinking shortfalls, blind spots, and disconnects. And then finally, I'll turn to the puzzle of what this means for education and discuss a vision for developing more conscientious approaches to online life. But first, I want to see if we're on the same page or we're on different pages about what we mean by the term digital ethics. So before I jump into the real substance of some of the issues I've studied, I really want to invite you to reflect on some of the features of the internet that raise moral or ethical puzzles in your mind. So what I'd like you to do is turn to a neighbor, someone sitting nearby you, and reflect on this question. From your perspective, what kinds of moral and ethical issues are raised by the internet and by digital life? So a couple of minutes of discussion with a neighbor, please. Okay, about 30 more seconds. All right, I'd love to hear from a couple of voices. Is someone willing to stand up and share a headline from your short chat? Is someone willing to stand up and share a headline from your short chat? Right here, thank you.
I run a girls' school in Australia, and one of the issues that we're really facing is that your sexuality is portrayed on media, and where our girls and our boys are getting their early messages about what is missing means.
Okay, that's fantastic. If you couldn't hear, someone who's the head of a girls' school in Australia talked about new access to information about sexuality on the internet, probably pornography, and what that means for young people's sense of what intimacy and relationships are. And that's a really important issue. Another thought, another voice on this.
What we were saying is that I am a teacher for kindergarten pupils in Valencia, here in Spain. And what we were saying is that we are usually very much concerned prevention. Here, it is true that we are talking mainly about adolescents and teenagers, but already we are facing problems with children who are very, very young. So, you know, whenever I go to a restaurant and I see mom and dad having lunch and the kid with the tablet playing, or I see a baby there playing with a tablet, I want to be able to eat, and I don't want my baby to disturb me, and there I go, I give him a tablet, and I think that we are using the internet in a way that is not good.
Hopefully translating for me, because I don't speak Spanish, sadly. And the comment there around young people, infants, and in early childhood, the exposure to technologies and the access to screens and what it's doing to their development, a really, really important issue. One more voice out there on a different topic that came up in your conversation.
We were talking about privacy and both privacy for individuals and privacy and their respective privacy for others, and how to navigate that, both for themselves and for others.
Yeah, that's great. So all of these issues are really important, and I don't promise to be able to touch on them in this talk today, but I can point folks in the direction of some additional resources. And certainly the issue of privacy is something that I've been thinking a lot about, and when I do a workshop actually this evening, that will focus on this issue of the ethics of privacy in online spaces. So that was great. What I'd like to do now is dive a bit deeper into some of the key moral and ethical issues of the internet that I've been thinking about. And I'd like to do this by sharing a couple of stories that I think are really revealing of both the unsettling challenges of the internet, but also some of the more positive opportunities for young people of growing up in a digital age. Now, the stories, as I mentioned earlier, are from the U.S. They're also from a couple of years ago, but recent events in the United States make them quite relevant, even poignant. So the first story is about something that happened on Facebook that involved a group of New York City police officers, New York City Police Department officers. So in September 2011, it came to the attention of the authorities who run the New York City Police Department that a group of police officers had been creators and active participants in a Facebook group called No More West Indian American Day Detail. Police officers created this Facebook group in order to complain about being assigned to work at and provide security for the West Indian American Day Parade, which is an annual celebratory event in Brooklyn in New York City. Posts on this public Facebook group referred to parade participants as savages and animals. Comments included drop a bomb and wipe them all out and let them kill each other. The group had approximately 1,200 participants. 60 members' names matched those of known police officers. Other participants were city officials and New York City firemen. While the Facebook page was technically public, city officials and the wider public were not aware of its existence until some lawyers who were doing an investigation of one of the police officers came across it on Facebook. Before the members of the group had a chance to delete the page, the lawyers created a digital copy of all of the content and shared it with New York Times reporters. So the evidence of this public Facebook group became all the more public at that moment. In the end, 17 police officers were disciplined by the New York City Police Department. So we live in a world in which Facebook and other social media sites can be leveraged in deeply troubling ways. The example is here, the troubling ways are to engage in racist speech. We have a second story from Steubenville, Ohio in the US, where in 2012, an intoxicated teen girl was sexually assaulted, raped by a group of high school football players after she passed out at a party. As the girl was attacked, several bystanders took photos and videos with their cell phones, which they shared on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and via text messaging apps. A 12-and-a-half-minute video in which onlookers joked about the rape as it was happening was posted on YouTube. Now, these pieces of digital evidence were submitted and became part of the trial of this group of high school football players. So Steubenville is another example of how digital media can be used in ways that are very destructive and dehumanizing, in ways that lead us to ask, what were they thinking? Yet this case is also an example of how participatory media can be used for good in ways that push back on some of those ideas and messages from these stories. In 2013, a U.S. college student named Samantha Stendahl was closely following news reports about the Steubenville trial as it was unfolding. She was becoming increasingly outraged and angry by what she was learning about what these boys had done to this teen girl. She was inspired to create a 26-second video entitled simply "A Needed Response" to Steubenville. I'm going to play that video for you now.
Hey bros, check you pass out on the couch. Guess what I'm gonna do to her? Real men treat women with respect.
So a very short video, but a powerful message to other young men about how women should be treated, and a real counter message to the things that had happened in Steubenville. We don't have to look too far to find other promising examples of how the internet is used to push back on things that are quite negative. Events in the U.S. over the past 2 weeks are really telling. The killing of 9 African American people while praying in their church in Charleston, South Carolina, led to expressions of pain and protest on social media and really added fuel to a campaign that's been going on Twitter for a long time called Black Lives Matter. We've also seen a lot of intense dialogue about and celebrations of the U.S. Supreme Court decision supporting gay marriage. So these are examples of how these social media can be used in really powerful and positive ways. But I think put together, these stories and examples really reveal the double-edged nature of the internet. They can be used to perpetuate harms, to share racist ideas and dehumanizing acts, but they can also be used in very profoundly positive ways. So my interest is in how young people really think about these broad potentials of the internet and how that informs their actions. What are they thinking about as they approach these media that are such a fundamental part of their lives? So turning to young people specifically, I think that this comic from the New Yorker is really telling. A lot of people that believe that young people today are born digital and that they're really growing up with these technologies, as the comment from one of our participants here suggested. They're growing up with media, having access to media from very young ages. So what are the impacts? This is a very important question. Certainly these technologies don't determine who youth will become. They don't determine precisely the nature of their character, but they do provide affordances. They provide opportunities, they provide constraints for action that can really powerfully shape young people's identities and their lives and how they express those identities. While many scholars and educators have been thinking about the impact of digital media on learning, my colleagues and I are interested in the broader human impacts. So Howard Gardner spoke earlier this week. He and another colleague, Katie Davis, published a book called The App Generation that really looks at how digital media is informing our sense of intimacy. So the comment raised earlier about sexuality and access to information about sexuality, how the digital media are affecting young people's budding identities and certainly their sense of imagination. But in this work, we really focused on what are some of the moral and ethical impacts. How are digital media really affecting how young people are thinking about certain key issues that we think are very important in the digital context? So earlier this week, I know that Howard Gardner, when he spoke, shared a bit about the work that we've done, and he talked a bit about the 5 ethical fault lines that we studied in our work. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'll just call out the key questions that we're interested in here. First of all, identity. How do young people express and explore their identities, and when does that expression cross over into deception or harming another person? That's the ethical interest here, the ethical issue. Credibility, how do we assess the credibility not just of information sources, but of individuals we interact with online? The sense of privacy, articulated beautifully by someone already, is, how do we have young people think about their own privacy, but also think about respecting the privacy of others in networked publics? How do young people think about the concepts of ownership and authorship, especially when there are so many tools you can use to copy, paste, remix, download? How does that change our notions of these concepts, and how are you thinking about them? And finally, this broad fault line of participation. How do we create norms on social media to guide our conduct, our speech, our commenting, the photos that we post? I think these ethical themes or fault lines have always been central features of human moral life. But I think they've become much more significant. Their significance, their ethical significance, is heightened because of certain qualities of digital technologies and environments. And I want to call out those qualities. First, we have the participatory nature of the web. Media are no longer passive. We can create our own content, we can post it, we can comment on other people's content. Second, our communications are often asynchronous, which can be a positive, meaning that they're not happening simultaneously. When we send an email, we don't expect an immediate response. Sometimes we get some. But the asynchronous nature of communication means that we can take time to reflect on what we want to say. At the same time, our conversations can sometimes be disjointed. Often our communications online are text-based, which can mean the loss of audio and visual cues that help us figure out the tone of what someone is sharing and can lead to a lot of misinterpretations. We also have the opportunities to act anonymously online. Now, certainly in certain spaces like Facebook, we're encouraged to use our real names. And so you can't be anonymous everywhere online, but sometimes people can feel anonymous, and I think that's because of another quality, and that's the quality I refer to as the arm's length quality of our communication with one another online. We can't see one another when we're operating from behind a screen. There's an inevitable distance between ourselves and others. It's really easy to post something online, and the effects are often invisible to us. So how do we handle that? A scholar named Dana Boyd talks about the persistence, replicability, and searchability of content that's digital. In other words, content sticks online. It stays there. It's copyable. You can take it, you can copy it and paste it from one place to another, and it's also searchable. We all know that everybody is Googleable in the digital age. So what are the implications? Finally, sites like Facebook and Twitter are networked publics. We have the ability to share content and information with a broad audience. How do we handle that power that's put to our fingertips, and how do young people in particular think about that? Now, these qualities are neither good nor bad in and of themselves. It's really how we take them up, how we seize them, that is the most important thing. And so a further matter for concern are what are our habits of how we connect with one another, our habits of connectivity. The scholar Sherry Turkle has talked about young people today as always on, constantly connected. And the concern she has is that undercuts, that makes less time for careful reflection, for autonomous reflection, that really is an important part of identity development and thinking about moral concerns. We also have the tendency to be multitasking and moving very quickly from one task to another, which can also undercut opportunities for moral reflection. Things move very quickly. Finally, while there is the great potential to be exposed to different perspectives online, we often end up in filter bubbles. We end up in conversation with people online who may have similar views to our own views, and so we don't take advantage fully of that opportunity to learn from others. I believe that these qualities of digital technologies and our habits of connectivity are really crucial to consider as we explore the moral and ethical impacts of the digital era. So with that broad framing in mind, I just want to share quickly what the heart of this research was. So the Good Play Project was led by Howard Gardner and myself, and we were investigating these questions. How do young people think about their online lives? What kinds of considerations guide the choices that they make when they post content, photos, comments in networked publics? And how do they respond to moral and ethical dilemmas when they come up? How do they think through those things? Are they even aware of certain kinds of dilemmas that come up? So our research involved qualitative interviews, and you'll get some insight into those in a few minutes. We talked with over 100 youth between the ages of 10 and 25. We also talked with 40 adults because we really wanted to understand the extent to which young people's perspectives on these issues were really different from adults in their lives. There was an educational piece to our work. We collaborated with Project New Media Literacies and Common Sense Media to create some educational materials. So in the book Disconnected, I focus on 3 of those ethical fault lines or themes that I talked about earlier: privacy, property, and participation. What I'd like to do today is really focus on that broadest fault line of online participation. And the way I'd like to do this is examine how young people approach speech in social media contexts, their own speech and the speech of other individuals. In other words, what are they thinking about when they write a tweet or a Snapchat message, or when they see what other young people and adults have posted in these spaces? How are they dealing with this? There are a couple of broad, essential questions here that I have in mind as I think about participation. How do we treat one another online? How do we respond to other people's content? And more generally, what sense of responsibility do we feel to other people in different spaces? So the four mindsets that we found when we talked with young people. The first one is play nice. Now, I think this approach to online speech is perfectly described by a 15-year-old named Trey. Trey said, "I think of it as you talk to someone on Facebook as you would talk to them in person. You don't treat someone like a jerk just because you're behind the microphone." And some people do use social network sites as an attack system, just to attack people and then cower away because they can't do it in real life. So what Trey is talking about here is sort of a contemporary twist on the golden rule: do unto others online as you would do to them face to face. Trey's moral principles for how he treats people online really mirror the principles he uses in face-to-face interactions. Be kind, be respectful. In other words, play nice. That's the essence of this here. Now, this mindset about online speech was fairly prevalent among the young people we interviewed, young people of all ages in our study. They often shared moral concerns, but those moral concerns, this play nice mindset, was often tied to people they knew really well, their close friends, members of their family, people that they interacted with offline as well. And this was good to see, pausing to reflect on how a friend might feel about a photo you post or a comment. That should be an essential thinking routine in the digital age. Prior to posting content, thinking about how this person might feel. How can I be kind and respectful? At the same time, given that our online interactions often involve individuals who we don't know directly, the play nice mindset is not entirely sufficient for participating ethically in these contexts. So that raises the it's a community mindset, and that considers the implications of the things that we say for a wider community of participants. So here we have Trey again. And he says this time, "I'm responsible to anyone who uses Facebook and my profile or whatever. If I have something bad or offensive on there, it affects everyone." So Trey is really thinking and feeling a broad sense of responsibility that pushes beyond his nearest and dearest, beyond his closest friends. His perspective recognizes that we're not just among friends online. We're in a broader community. The things that we say and do are poised to be influencing other people. There are many, many unintended audiences for the things that we post online. And indeed, our actions, the things we do, but also our inactions, the things we don't do, set norms. They suggest what is fair game online, what is permissible. And that's something really important to be thinking about. So thinking about the broader effects of our speech is really an essential practice in the digital age. However, beyond our exemplar, Trey, it just didn't come up that often among the young people we interviewed. More often, young people were thinking more narrowly about their close friends or more often than that, thinking in a sharply self-focused or consequence-driven way. So here's where the mindset of, will I get into trouble, comes in. The will I get into trouble mindset came up across our sample, this idea of the things that you post online can lead you to be punished or sanctioned by someone out there. They came up across the topics online, but especially vividly when we asked young people about a situation where an online hate group was created about a teacher. So here we have Danielle, who's 13. Her immediate response, and the most important thing on her mind, was that whoever participated in this online hate group would get into trouble. So the possibility of unintended audiences and the primary concern for negative consequences loomed large for Danielle. As I'll talk to you in a minute, this was the most common way of thinking about online interactions. When I put something out there in a network public, how might it come back to bite me? How would it hurt me or have negative consequences for the participant who put the content out there originally? Now, certainly the concern for getting into trouble is natural and age-appropriate. However, the emphasis on personal consequences often dominated or sometimes was the only thing in young people's thinking, and that left little room for moral or ethical issues and concerns. Even more worrying to us than the I'll get into trouble mindset was the mindset that it's just the internet. So here, I'm going to share some thoughts from a young man named John who was a frequent participant in online discussion forums. Here's what John has to say. Most of the time when people see something online, their main reaction is to laugh because most of the stuff on the internet you have no sway over at all. So you just laugh and move on. John adds, on the internet, each person feels 0.001% responsible. They're more like, I'm on the internet, there's really nothing I can do. I know nothing about this person, so I'm just going to stand back and be a casual observer. And the internet does turn a lot of interaction into casual observation, where people are interested but very removed from one another. So here John represents the idea that the arm's length quality of online life, the distance that is a key feature of how we interact with one another, sharply reduces our sense of responsibility and our sense of agency. We're far away from one another. We can't do much to alter the course of different interactions. In turn, he takes on a casual observer stance, interested but removed. John really speaks here to a passive bystander disposition that he believes is the norm among his peers online. So I think that looking closely at John's thinking is really revealing. Now, he was the most detailed on this point, but we saw shades of this attitude among all of the young people we interviewed. Comments like, stuff on the internet doesn't matter, it's not real, it's all just a joke, came up frequently among the youth we interviewed. So I raise these quotes, these voices of young people, and I talk about them, about these mindsets, because, first of all, they're important data points about how youth are thinking about speech on the web. But the second reason I raise these quotes is that there are echoes here with our broader findings when we talked with youth not just about speech, but also about privacy and how they think about privacy, the privacy of other people on the internet, how they think about ownership and authorship and make decisions about downloading or appropriating content. So some of these ideas really mirrored our broader findings, and I want to share those broad findings and how we made sense of them with you now. So across topics, we really observed that youth most often framed their decisions, their online decision-making in terms of consequences, in really self-focused or consequence-driven ways. What might happen to me personally as a result of posting this photo, grabbing this text from Wikipedia for a school assignment? Will I get fired from a job, denied admission to a college, or experience another negative personal consequence as a result of my tweet or my photo? And are the rewards of doing it worth that risk, that set of risks? Because there are some rewards to putting out content that may be a little bit inappropriate. Rewards that include likes, retweets, and praise from peers. So that self-focused way of thinking really dominated across topics that we studied. Now, it's natural and understandable that young people will be thinking about consequences, as I said earlier, and striving to take care of themselves. We want them to be doing a degree of this thinking, absolutely. We don't want them to be posting inappropriate content that could be harmful to them. Yet we also want to see broader ways of thinking engaged. So we looked at the extent of what we call moral thinking, and that's thinking about people you know well, your nearest and dearest, like Trey. Trey was thinking about his close friends with the play nice mindset. This involves showing empathy towards these strong ties, engaging the golden rule like Trey did, and other moral principles. So across the different topics we studied, we saw a good amount of moral thinking. The kids we talked with were very adept at considering their closest friends in an empathetic way and trying to anticipate how they might feel about online content posted about them, whether it be photos or comments, and so on. And so this was heartening to see. However, as I noted earlier, moral thinking is not entirely sufficient for participating in an ethical manner in networked publics, where the things that we share are poised to affect individuals who we don't know, whose reactions and interpretations we can't fully anticipate. So the internet really calls for a broader set of capacities and dispositions, and that's where ethical thinking comes in. Ethical thinking is a capacity to think in more abstract terms about the broader impact of our online choices, the impact for a larger group, community, nation, or world. So when Trey said it's a community, that's the heart of ethical thinking. And Howard Gardner has written a bit about the distinction between neighborly morality and ethical thinking in a couple of different books, 5 Minds for the Future, Truth, Beauty, and Goodness in the 21st Century. And he spoke, I believe, a little bit about it earlier this week. So the capacity to think ethically is really important, but beyond Trey's stance that it's a community, I said it wasn't all that prevalent. We do have a couple of other examples from our study, however. We found a young gamer who's a participant in massive multiplayer games talking eloquently and in an ethical manner about the impact of cheating in these large games that involve millions of people around the world. And this gamer spoke about cheating as a problem not just on the individual level, but something that affects the broader game economy, that really destroys the integrity of what the entire set of community members is trying to do in that game. So that's a great example of ethical thinking. We also spoke with a young person who was inspired to correct misinformation on Wikipedia because he was really concerned about how that information might be taken as truth and really negatively affect individuals out there who he doesn't know. Despite these impressive examples, as I said, ethical thinking was somewhat rare. All of the young people we spoke with showed a capacity to do ethical thinking, but they often prioritized the other modes of thinking. In other words, ethical thinking, there was a capacity there, but it was not a habit of mind. Now, this points to a fundamental insight from the thinking dispositions and moral psychology literatures, the distinction between having an ability or a skill or a capacity and then being sensitive to the opportunity to engage it or being inclined to use it. And so this is where I cite some of my colleagues' work on thinking dispositions, where they break down the distinction between having a skill, being sensitive to opportunity to use it, and the inclination to use it as well. And I think that's highly relevant here. Nearly all of the young people, I mean the teens and young adults in particular, who we spoke with, showed a capacity to do ethical thinking, but they weren't necessarily inclined to do it. So in Disconnected, I emphasize how young people's approaches to online life are often marked by different kinds of thinking shortfalls that relate to that distinction between ability, sensitivity, and inclination. I talk about blind spots as failures to be alert or sensitive to the moral or ethical dimensions of online situations. For example, posting a video on YouTube without thinking about how it might be interpreted or misinterpreted by unknown viewers. Failing to see how the things that we say on social media can contribute to norms and affect other people whom we don't know. Those are examples of blind spots. Whereas disconnects are where young people would recognize they were sensitive to some of the moral or ethical quandaries related to their online choices, but then they would disconnect from them and prioritize the other things they'd like to do. For example, when posting a sarcastic or intentionally hurtful comment online, one might recognize the potential for harm, but then dismiss it as less important than the opportunity to vent or to amuse your online friends with the comment that you'd like to make. So considering the distinction I mentioned a moment ago, blind spots can be seen as failures of sensitivity, whereas disconnects are failures of inclination. Failures of a sense of agency, I think, are also wrapped up in the inclination or disinclination part. If young people don't feel like they can do anything about the things that they see online, if they feel like they have no sway over certain interactions that unfold online, as John articulated, then they're going to be disinclined to address them. I think there are some important questions we need to be asking about these blind spots and disconnects. How they're shaped, for example, by the qualities of digital technologies that I mentioned earlier, the distance between ourselves and others, the fact that we operate from behind a screen. Does that make blind spots and disconnects much more likely? We also need to consider how they're shaped by the way we use technologies, our habits of connectivity, the fact that we often multitask or move very quickly. Does that contribute to some of these thinking shortfalls that we identified in our research? There are also the norms that exist in young people's social networks, the norms that exist in adults' networks as well, that powerfully shape the things that we feel are appropriate to say and do in those spaces. But finally, I think one of the most important pieces of the puzzle is how role models and messages from adults can figure in to some of these thinking shortfalls. And that's where I want to mention some of the findings from our interviews with adults. But first, we should take note that some role models for young people on the web are incidental. They come across them. They come across examples of adults engaging in particular kinds of behaviors online, in sharing racist speech, for example, in being disrespectful in the comment section of news sites. In these ways, adults are acting as incidental mentors or anti-mentors to young people. But we also have the more purposeful mentors, typically teachers and parents of young people. And here our findings were a bit concerning. When we talked with adults themselves, parents and teachers, and when we also asked young people about the messages they hear from adults, we found a couple of troubling things. First, nearly all of the adults we interviewed displayed blind spots and sometimes disconnects, both in their own online choices, how they handled social media themselves personally, but also in the messages that they conveyed to youth. When we asked youth about their conversations with parents and teachers, the top messages they reported hearing were focused on stranger danger, internet safety issues, and the potential consequences of posting inappropriate content online. In other words, that emphasis on you might get into trouble for the things that you post online. These were the dominant messages that young people told us they were hearing from adults in their lives. Now, certainly conversations about kindness, community, and citizenships were sometimes mentioned, but they were typically overwhelmed by these more consequence-oriented messages from adults. So overall, the story I tell in my book is a glass half-empty one. While I did find impressive examples of ethical sensitivity, overall, I emphasize what's missing, what youth and adults are blind to or disconnected from, and my concern that our thinking about the web is often, or is too often, individual-centered, short-sighted, and myopic. So how do we support approaches to online life that are more conscientious? That is the critical question that I want to give some answers, maybe not fully sufficient or definitive. This is exactly the formula for conscientious connectivity, but I want to provide some hints in that direction. So I see conscientious modes of connectivity or habits of mind as those that are much more mindful of the potential ethical implications of the things we put out there online, the implications for people we know well and also people we don't know, the implications for the integrity of online communities. Being a conscientious digital citizen requires that we have certain skills regarding how our ethical choices might affect others. But we also need to have an ethical disposition. We have to be disposed or inclined to engage with moral and ethical concerns. So in Disconnected, I speak to 3 specific ethical thinking skills. The first is complex perspective taking, considering how, for example, a tweet might be interpreted by different readers with different interests, concerns, and identities. I also talk about roles and responsibilities thinking, considering how your online content, your photos, your tweets might reflect back on a community, organization, or school that you're a member of. And finally, community thinking, exploring how a wider community might be affected by your online choices. These skills are vital. Yet, as I noted earlier, being an ethical or conscientious citizen requires not just having skills, but being inclined to use them and to foreground ethical concerns. So that's where the ethical disposition piece comes in. So I think about ethical dispositions as having a couple of key ingredients. First, we need to be sensitive to or alert to the moral or ethical dilemmas that might be at hand when we make choices in networked publics. One avenue that I think is helpful for cultivating greater ethical sensitivity, that I'll talk through in more detail in a moment, is to prompt young people to think through different online situations. Once we know that dilemmas are at hand, we also need to be motivated or inclined to really grapple with them. Now, addressing the motivation or inclination dimension is more complicated. Ultimately, it's a moral identity issue. We can't make kids care, but we can really think about the extent to which some of those technical features of online spaces may make our values and our moral identities fade into the background. How can we bring them to the front? And so I think that one avenue for doing that is encouraging youth to reflect on their responsibilities more often and their core values. But finally, I think an ethical disposition needs to be fueled by a sense of agency. After thinking through dilemmas and reflecting on responsibilities, youth need to feel that they can have sway or agency over what happens online. And that requires that we explore action steps, that we invite youth to think about different ways they can respond to digital situations, especially ethically tinged ones. So I'm going to discuss each one in turn, thinking through dilemmas. I think talking about high-profile cases of online misdeeds is one way into this problem space, one way to help youth be much more aware of and reflective about their actions. But I think we should also engage them in reflective conversations about their everyday decisions, about what to post and what to say and do online. And I think there are a lot of resources out there that might help us with that. My colleague Lynn Berenson runs a project called the Family Dinner Project, which provides examples of ethical dilemmas that can be discussed at the family dinner table, and I think that's another prime space for young people to think about their decision-making. Common Sense Media has some great materials that really provide cases that are very similar to the kinds of everyday dilemmas young people face. For example, here around privacy, that I think can be a useful resource in that regard. In terms of reflecting on responsibility, to whom or what we are responsible to when we participate in network publics is a fundamental part of this. A valuable tool for engaging in this kind of reflection is Common Sense Media's Rings of Responsibility, which invite youth to think about how our actions can affect different stakeholders at play online. And I think used as a reflection tool, these different rings can support awareness of the kind of thinking that we're doing, and also nudge our thinking about responsibility beyond the self, nudge it in a broader direction, and ultimately help strive for an optimal balance between thinking about the self and thinking about others. And there are nice connections here with some of the work that Facing History and Ourselves has done on what is your universe of obligation? Who do you feel obligated to in different situations? And finally, we need to cultivate a sense of ethical agency, a feeling that one can do something about some of the situations observed online, that we can take responsibility. And I think a couple of key ways we can do that is, number one, we can inspire young people by calling attention to exemplars. youth who are using the web to do something civic, to do something political, to really call attention to key issues out there in the world. I think we can call attention to positive digital citizens, but we can also invite and encourage young people to envision for themselves how they might respond to particular situations online. How can we empower them with tools to respond to hate speech when they see it? Rather than just giving them the message, you should ignore it and just walk away and withdraw, which we heard a lot from youth. So this work needs to involve exploring productive avenues for being positive agents online. So in closing, the work my colleagues and I have done suggests the importance of finding ways to support ethical thinking in relation to online life. I've suggested 3 promising avenues for supporting the ethical skills and dispositions I feel are needed given the complicated ways digital media has changed our lives. Thinking through dilemmas, reflecting on responsibilities, and exploring action steps. And I believe that parents, teachers, and other key adults in young people's lives have a really important role to play here. So I want to thank you for listening and thinking about these ideas with me, and I hope we can get a conversation going in person here at the conference or online. Thank you so much.